Elias, Scrollkeeper shower. The sin of old paper and beeswax polish was, as always, a comfort. Elias, known as Scrollkeeper amongst the tomekeepers, traced the gold lettering on the spine of a forgotten grimoire. Sunlight, filtered through the stained glass windows of the archive, cast long, dancing shadows. Here, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge, grief felt manageable. His wife, Clara, had loved these books too. She'd cataloged half of them, her elegant script a familiar presence in the margins. He'd spent the last 5 years precisely arranging things, maintaining order as a way of holding on to what was lost. Each book in its place, a small, silent act of remembrance. He wasn't searching for answers within the pages, merely finding solace in the routine. But the routine felt increasingly like a cage. He hadn't truly read a book in years, not for pleasure, not for discovery. He knew every shelf, every inscription, every chipped corner by heart, but the knowledge felt stale. He wanted to feel the thrill of the unknown again, the sense of wonder Clara had always found in these ancient texts. A rumor had reached him, a whisper amongst the newer initiates, of a hidden section in the archive, a chamber containing books forbidden even to the tomekeepers. Books said to contain dangerous knowledge. He didn't want power or secrets. He wanted to feel something beyond the dull ache of loss. He wanted a spark, a flicker of Clara's intellectual fire. The hidden chamber was behind a false wall in the oldest part of the archive, concealed behind a towering bookshelf dedicated to obscure celestial charts. The air within was cold and thick with dust, smelling not of paper and beeswax, but of something older, something metallic. The books here weren't bound in leather and gold, but in dark, unidentifiable materials, etched with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe before his eyes. The light from his lantern cast grotesque shadows, making the chamber feel less like a library and more like a tomb. There were no familiar classifications, no titles in any language he recognized. This wasn't scholarship. It was something else entirely. A chill, deeper than the temperature, settled in his bones. He began to decipher the symbols, painstakingly comparing them to fragments of forgotten languages, drawing on a lifetime of accumulated knowledge. It wasn't a language of words, he realized, but of concepts, of raw, untamed ideas. He learned of rituals to communicate with the departed, of ways to glimpse beyond the veil of mortality. He discovered a formula, a complex series of incantations and alchemical processes, purportedly capable of briefly restoring a lost soul to the world. The process was dangerous, the text warned, fraught with peril. But the possibility of seeing Clara again, of speaking to her, of simply knowing she was still somewhere, overwhelmed his caution. He adapted the ritual to his own capabilities, simplifying it, modifying it, driven by a desperate hope. The ritual worked. Or, at least, something appeared. A shimmering form coalesced in the center of the chamber, vaguely resembling Clara. She spoke, her voice a fractured echo of the woman he remembered. He asked her questions, desperate for reassurance, for answers. But her responses were disjointed, fragmented, riddled with inconsistencies. It wasn't Clara, not entirely. It was a reflection, a phantom cobbled together from his memories, his grief, his desires. It felt real enough, for a fleeting moment, a tantalizing illusion. He felt a surge of joy, then a sickening dread. He'd gotten what he wanted, but it wasn't what he needed. The cost was immediate and brutal. The chamber began to crumble, the ancient stones groaning under an unseen pressure. His own memories started to unravel, blurring and distorting. The books around him seemed to scream, their pages turning to ash. He realized, with growing horror, that he hadn't just summoned a phantom. He'd opened a rift, a tear in the fabric of reality. The energy released was draining his life force, consuming his memories, his identity. The phantom, now fading, offered no comfort, only a chilling emptiness. He traded his past for a fleeting illusion, and the price was his very self. He stumbled back into the main archive, a shell of his former self, barely able to remember his own name. He returned to the familiar order of the archive, but it felt alien now. The sin of old paper and beeswax no longer offered comfort, only a hollow ache. He wandered the shelves, a ghost amongst the books, unable to recognize the titles, the authors, the classifications. The other tomekeepers, sensing his disorientation, offered help, but he couldn't explain what had happened, couldn't articulate the loss that had consumed him. He was a custodian without a memory, a scholar without knowledge. He resumed his duties, arranging the books, polishing the shelves, but it was all mechanical, devoid of meaning. He existed, but he no longer lived. Years passed. He continued to maintain the archive, a silent, spectral figure moving amongst the shelves. The grief hadn't lessened, but it had transformed. It was no longer the sharp, agonizing pain of loss, but a dull, persistent ache, a constant reminder of his folly. He'd learned a terrible lesson. Some doors are best left unopened. Some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. He'd sought to conquer grief, to defy death, and in doing so, had lost himself. He was still the Scrollkeeper, but he was no longer Elias. He was a living monument to a terrible mistake, a cautionary tale whispered amongst the tomekeepers, a permanent reminder that even the most noble intentions can lead to the darkest of consequences.